Okay, so next up we've got Dr. Thierry Ford, a senior paintings conservator from the National Museum of Art in Norway.
Thank you, and thank you very much for inviting me here today. Just go to the first slide. Yeah, so I've been working as a paintings conservator for quite a while now, and I work for the National Museum, and we've just opened a new museum, so I really recommend that you come and see it. And I just really wanted to share some of the research I've been undertaking over the past sort of 3 or 4 years. And this concerns actually, we have a wonderful collection of Munch paintings. So I also apologize for the very long title, so I'll try and make sense of that. So what I mean by revisiting the surface, well, I was interested, or still am interested in looking at these painted surfaces in terms of varnish layers, which I will go into, and also looking at Munch's original surfaces. And by a group case study, I wanted to look at the whole collection rather than a few sort of solo case studies. And non-invasive, that was sort of critical to my sort of methods. So I will actually focus just on 2 diagnostic sort of techniques that I experimented with. And the overarching aim is really to, you know, how best to preserve this, this collection. But just to give you a brief introduction to the collection itself, the National Museum has 57 paintings, well actually 56. One of them was borrowed in the 1990s, so we're still looking for that one. And it's not to be confused with the Munch Museum's collection. So this collection is actually the first collection, public collection of Munch paintings. And they're sort of early and mid-career masterpieces. And they were acquired also during Munch's lifetime. So that's also quite an important criteria. And they were housed in, or exhibited in the former National Gallery building until 2019, when the building closed and we moved to new premises. And you know, we have a lot of sort of first versions of the Scream, the Sick Child, and Madonna. So Munch was very much into making different versions. But anyway. But what is sort of central to the research and why I wanted to look at this collection as a whole is the way they've been acquired over the years under this sort of first director. And they've been always presented since 1909 as a group of paintings. Sort of first Munch had his own wall and then his own room. And then when the museum closed in 2019, the Norwegian public was so concerned about recreating this collection in a similar room. So that sort of influenced my approach. So what's varnishes got to do with it? Well, in the 19th century, well, before the 19th century as well, but in the 19th century it was very popular to varnish paintings. That's where we get the term vernissage from, as you see here, turn of varnishing or touching up a painting before an opening. But at the same time, you get a lot of artists reacting against that, especially the Impressionists. And we know also Munch didn't varnish his paintings as other artists might have done. And we know that because there was already a scandal in 1909. So a varnish, for those who are unaware, who don't know what a varnish is, it's either a natural or synthetic resin dissolved in a solvent. And when I'm talking about varnish layers, I'm talking about the non-original sort of restoration varnishes that saturate. They usually have a dual purpose, saturate and also protect the paint layers. And this is important to understand, you know, what these layers are. But just to complicate matters, we actually know that Munch actually experimented with sort of artist varnishes just to saturate or create special effects, so to speak, with some of his paintings. And we have this lovely UV-induced fluorescence image here of the Sick Child, where we see streaks of varnish, which are actually his. You don't see those today, unless you look at it in UV, but they're still there. And we know that also because that's also documented. So that was sort of, that's really sort of the issues here that I'm dealing with. So the questions here were really, why, historical, why were they varnished and when? But what I want to concentrate today is sort of the technical and scientific examinations that we undertook. And that was, what were they varnished with? So what did these past conservators use? How many layers? And I wanted to explore using sort of non-invasive diagnostic techniques. And the reason being, when you're looking at a large collection, you can't, I mean, traditionally you might take small cross-sections like we have here in the bottom left-hand corner. One thing that, well, it's probably not so very ethical, it's time-consuming, and also these paintings are also not so accessible. They're always hanging in this monk room. So these were many of the factors that influenced our choice. So the first was really technique that we explored with which we've spoken about today, is FTIR, which is, as you know, is a well-established benchtop analytical technique for cultural heritage, for varnishes, binders, pigments, etc. And like also Michaela explained, this is, you're very dependent on having a database of standards or references. And here was also, compared to the miniatures, I can't put these large paintings under a microscope. I'd rather not take samples. But I had a colleague who works with plastics or with a collection of plastics, and she had just acquired a portable or handheld FTIR spectrometer. And I thought, well, maybe we could experiment with this and see if this works. And this has been done by using other portable spectrometers, but not the Agilent. So we thought, well, let's just test this. And here it is. I mean, if those of you that work with XRF, portable XRF, it's a similar size. So it fitted quite nicely into the stand that we had. We can bring it to the painting. You can, take readings over the whole surface. It's non-invasive. And you can also come back again and take readings again. This particular equipment comes with 3 probes. The sort of typical ATR, which you would use on a benchtop microscope. This was not possible because you have to have very direct contact with the crystal, the ATR crystal. So you can imagine that would cause, well, it does cause problems. It would ruin the paint surface. External reflectance, unlike the study with the miniatures, was not successful for us. And that's probably because also the surfaces of these paintings, when you look at them under the microscope, the topography is quite rough. So we tried with drifts, diffuse reflectance, and that actually we got really quite good signal. So the next thing was to take it to the paintings and test it. And using UV images, we could then sort of, work out a few sort of spots where we wanted to take some readings. And we were sort of successful with some of the results, especially if we could sort of, if we knew which varnishes that had been used on some of the paintings. So that was one thing, the characterizations of the varnishes. The other thing was we wanted to know how many layers, because you won't get that with FTIR. Oh yeah, I can talk about that later. Sorry, I missed something. We'll come back, apologies. But we wanted to also have a technique where we could sort of have an idea of the sort of stratigraphy and the distribution of these layers. And OCT, which is optical coherence tomography, this is, in the last 2 decades, has been used a lot in cultural heritage research. And this allows you really to sort of see, or you get a virtual cross-section of the top layers or the superficial layers, the reflective layers, such as varnishes or glazes. And I was very lucky to work with a team from Poland who brought over their machine, their OCT, that's been designed for paintings, and we were able to look at, I think it was up to 13 paintings. And OCT, sort of similar sort of principles, if I'm allowed to say that, but to FTIR, but in this case using infrared, but in this case it's a much narrower spectral range. And what we're interested in here is actually the reflective properties and the signal that we're getting. And so it allows you to sort of work out And I'll maybe what I've done. So what you have basically is that you have the signal coming in. If you get some reflection from a varnish layer, then you'll get a signal. So that's what we call an A scan. So in a way, it's the depth of the scan, and then of course you can repeat this in a line in a B scan, and that will give you a sort of a virtual cross section. And of course you can also make a cube out of this. I should have actually maybe added this in. Apologies for that. But anyway, I thought I'd just put in an animation just to wake you up. But this is just gives you an idea of the sort of the practical advantages of OCT. And for me as a conservator, I love things that are visual. So this kind of information is very useful for me, compared to maybe the FTIR, where I really need the sort of collaboration and discussions with a scientist. So this was worked extremely well. But in addition to that, we also found some very interesting discoveries. Here's the painting of Puberty by Munch, which, according to records, has been restored and only has one varnish. If you were to take a cross-section, which you would do from one of the edges of the painting, you would only see one layer of varnish. But when we took OCT spots around the figure, we found up to 4 different layers. And this is quite interesting because this sort of indicates that there are glazes underneath the restoration varnishes, but also possibly, I found it a lot in 4 other paintings, also around contours of the figures from these earlier paintings, which suggests that Munch is also experimenting with sort of saturating out certain parts of the composition. So something that, we didn't really know about, we thought, which was masked. So what does this all mean, really? Well, these 2 diagnostic techniques, they were non-invasive. They were useful for me because I was able to sort of get a very sort of broad sort of first idea of the varnishes in the collection. Limitations with FTIR is that you really need to have a good library of standards. Also, there's the issue of interpretation. The problem with paintings is that they're not homogeneous. They're very complex matrices, and so you get a lot of sort of overlapping bands with the binders, the pigments, so difficult interpretation, and obviously it's impossible to see the multi-layers. So partly successful, but I sort of look. Hopefully there will be another technique that will come up which may make things easier. OCT. Practical benefits, very user-friendly, love the visual information, and also you're able to detect several layers and go over the whole surface. And this is very useful for sort of later cleaning strategies, or if you want to do sort of more targeted sampling, because there will come a point where we will have to go in and take a sample. But it also gave us this wonderful information about Munch's original and local surface effects. So finally, sort of future perspectives. Here are 2 paintings that are unvarnished, which have escaped the restorer's varnishes pre-war. The self-portrait and the Scream that you're all familiar with. And what's interesting with these, when we looked at these with OCT, they do have these kind of sort of isolated areas of varnish or oil skins, which give us an idea of Munch's technique, especially the Scream. And actually there is a kind of thin varnish on the Scream, which has been applied by Munch, and that is actually one of the main issues why it's fading or there's a color change. So the next sort of part of the project will be really to sort of, can we match these with some of the varnishes that we know Munch used from his summer house and also from the Munch Museum. And of course that will be more an invasive approach. But yes, and obviously there's a lot of people to thank, and I hope this has been of some interest. Thank you very much.
Awesome, thank you very much, Thierry. So have we got any questions at all? Yes.
My question is about the technique, the OCT, the instrument itself. Does it work mainly with translucent layers, or how does it stop when you hit an opaque layer? Or,
yes, so sorry, I probably rushed through it too quickly. I was looking at the clock, sort of, if we can go back. It wasn't, maybe if we get to the top. Yeah, here, so here you have the tomogram, sorry. And I should have read from my notes instead of doing it freestyle. But you have basically, this is in false color. So the more scattering, so the warmer the color. And so working from the top, there's the interaction with the air. So you get the first layer, and so it's the transparent or semi-transparent layers that will appear dark. And then between the layers, you'll see the layers. And then the trailing off you'll see, that's the actual, if you think of a traditional cross-section, that's the sort of paint layer, basically. So very sort of briefly sort of described. But it gives you a good indication of that there are several transparent layers. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, does the beam just travel through until it hits an opaque layer?
Yeah, and then then it will just trail off. Yeah. So it's very good for varnishes and glazes that are lying on the top, because that's the information you want rather than the paint structure underneath. So of course, if you wanted to look at glazes between paint layers, no, then
it's not going to work.
No, then you would have to take a cross section, or that's probably some.
Okay, and that's the information it's going to give you, just like that. These
superficial layers on top, yeah. So.
Okay, and can you set up a range of, like, I want to go here? Can you make it the beam go? No, it would just go.
Yeah, I presume that depends. I'm not a scientist, but I presume that depends the type of equipment. Yeah, this was equipment that was that we had scientists come over that had designed their own SD OCT. Yeah, but for me, it was just a very practical way of scanning a painting and being able to have an understanding of the superficial layers. And like I said, I think, for me, using these non-invasive techniques is more sort of to get sort of an initial overview, and then I can come in and do more targeted sampling. And there's a lot of, like the extra layers in puberty around the figure, and also in the Madonna and things like that I wouldn't have known about necessarily, especially with cleaning. And so, but it has been used on other, there's a lot of publications on OCT. Actually, that OCT for art, where is it? Yes, if you go in OCT for art, you'll get all the publications.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I take it it's a kind of moving stage then, that you can set up an area that you have of interest?
Yes. So now you're just scanning small areas.
Yeah. And then you're just moving across bit by, okay.
So maybe they'll be able to do, like with the scanning XRF, maybe hopefully that had designed their own SD OCT, yeah. But for me, it was just a very practical way of scanning a painting and being able to have an understanding of the superficial layers. And like I said, I think, for me, using these non-invasive techniques is more sort of to get sort of an initial overview, and then I can come in and do more targeted sampling. And there's a lot of, like the extra layers in puberty around the figure, and also in the Madonna and things like that I wouldn't have known about necessarily, especially with cleaning. And so, but it has been used on other, there's a lot of publications on OCT. Actually, that OCT for art, where is it? Yes, if you go in OCT for art, you'll get all the publications.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I take it it's a kind of moving stage then, that you can set up an area that you have of interest?
Yes. So now you're just scanning small areas.
Yeah. And then you're just moving across bit by, okay.
So maybe they'll be able to do, like with the scanning XRF, maybe hopefully they'll be able to do the whole painting soon, or the whole surface,
we got any other questions? Oh, awesome. Well, thank you very much again, Thierry.